In the spirit of the concept of beginning with the end in mind, I'd like to introduce what could be the most important yoga pose. Of course, all poses are important, and how you approach them is critical. But the first pose in yoga, called mountain, is an upright standing position. However, most of us spend our lives seated. So how can we translate standing mountain into sitting mountain? This takes some focus and preparation. It's not just about parking yourself on a chair. I've chosen my deck chair and taken my shoes off so I can demonstrate what I think is preferred angles of my limbs. And even this is not optimal. But it's real, and that's what matters in life. Taking your shoes off will shorten the length of your legs, which if you sit forward on a chair, you might have your hips higher than your knees. Because if you're standing, that's true. When one sits, if you're laying back, crossing your legs, or doing many items that are unthought of, but just done, you might create strain in your body. You might compromise breathing and your cognition. I'm going to turn the chair sideways. And I'd like you to consider this angle. Is this higher than here? And if not, you can use a pillow. Coming up a little higher creates a little more slope, and you can push your tail down and back and bring your belly up and forward. Gravity is helpful here. I also like to use 2 fists for the spacing of my knees and feet. Check that out for you. What's 2 fists? Also, the idea of sitting with my palms up and my upper arms plumb or vertical from my shoulder positions my hands about 2/3 of the way down my thigh. My pinky and ring finger can rest on my leg, and this can potentially float outward. Try that on both sides. This could be work already. Consider breathing, and then you can call it yoga. So as you sit here, you may attempt to rotate the elbows and bring the palms up. Settle the hands on the thighs. You can press down a little bit to sit up a little more tall. Good. And rest. You can breathe. Let the lungs fill. And train your muscles, legs, mid-body, neck and shoulders, so that eventually you might relax in this position. I'm going to turn. Try the 2 fists. Why is that helpful? Because if you were standing, this might be your ideal positioning. You can also then engage your inner thighs without closing the space, as if you were sitting on the saddle of a horse, and that you engaged inward pushed through the stirrups and was ready for your giddy up. It's also where people might position themselves to meditate. I invite you to consider beginning with the end in mind when you're approaching a chair. See how this feels and let me know. You can contact me at howie@youcallthisyoga.org. I welcome your feedback. Namaste. Hello, I'm Howie Shareff, and welcome to another show from You Call This Yoga, an educational nonprofit organization. The history of You Call This Yoga involves many of my surgeries and compromised body elements. 2 neck fusions, front and back, a right hip replacement, all before 2008. This year, despite all my best efforts to avoid another surgery, I had a left hip replacement. What I've come to learn is that there are some basic skills for walking that are beneficial whether you've had prosthetics or just wear and tear in life. I'd like to review them so that whether you have a walker, a cane, or 1 or 2 legs, you have the capacity to improve your ability to walk. Notice that I'm standing by the wall. The wall is neutral and it tells me how I'm doing relative to a vertical plane. We're also head forwarded, tipping, collapsing in the front body, that we lose reference of the back body. I like to think of a triangle between my shoulder blades and my tailbone, engaging back and downward so that I have 3 points of reference against the wall. What about the head? Isn't that a reasonable reference? Yes, it can be with some practice, but not everyone is in a position to engage those elements and draw the head back and look at themselves and say, gosh, my neck looks really weird. Why would I want to do that? Well, it supports your head, that's why, and you'll get over yourself eventually. But in the meantime, I'm going to take my head away and just use those 3 points of reference. Standing here with other points of reference, these handlebars for my walker gives me another referencing. I'll turn my palms upward, which will then foster my shoulder blades drawing downward. If I was gripping the walker or gripping anything, it activates these muscles and compromises my vertical projection. So consider, if you could, finding a vertical spot. It could be a door, it could be a refrigerator, it could be a wall, it could be in your garage like I am in mine, where I've beaten up the wall with my car, but the wall stays true. Palms up allow me to lift my chest and then eventually bring my elbows back towards the wall when I inhale. And I can release and come back to my walker. Similarly, if you don't have a walker, and that's okay if you don't, I can use the back of my fingernails to touch the wall if possible, and then release that. So there's a rotation in my shoulder socket, my elbow socket, and that there's different elements rotating. I'm also breathing, which makes it yoga. Practicing this kind of engagement and referencing is a great start, because we seldom notice where we are positioned in space. Good. After you practice that a bit, I'd like you to consider your legs. For me, having surgery on one side, I'm a little more attuned to what is going on here. Fortunately, my surgeon, Dr. Vaughn, did a great job, and my hips are more level than before. My pants may not look it, but my hips are more level. Therefore, I can start by drawing my feet downward, not gripping, but just gentle engagement. When I draw down, I can breathe in and bring my belly upward. That causes my pelvis to rotate a little bit front to back and create a little bit of mobility in the hip area. Wonderful. So we can practice that little bit of pelvic rocking while stabilized by the shoulder blades, a little bit of the tailbone referencing. I've now added my elbows against the wall and my pinky knuckles. You've got pinky knuckles right here. See if you can gently engage them. You might add the ring finger knuckles on the next breath. You might add the middle finger knuckles and flare the fingers a little longer, down away from your shoulders. Good. And if possible, you might even engage the thumbs. Ooh, this right side's getting a little tappy. Good. And take a break. Now what about that head? Well, we have something called Yoga Cotillion, where we'll put a book on our head, draw it back to the wall, and see if we can maintain that. You may not be ready for that yet. Let's just practice the head towards the wall. See if you can engage the feet downward, tailbone, shoulder blades, 10-finger nail beds, and the head, and then release. So that's a lot. And then picture the book on top. It could be a soft covered book. Good. One more. And you may notice if your body has a little reaction to that. Mine does. Mine gets a little tremory. It happens. Let's shake the knees out so that the legs don't get too tight. Keep breathing a little bit, trying to get the circulation going. Good. With my physical therapy at Sports and More, I've had to focus on particular elements of my legs to improve my mobility, especially with surgery and swelling. Fortunately, I don't have pain, so therefore I can be pretty aware of what's going on. One of the areas that's very critical for movement is the thigh, the quad muscle, and the glute, your cheek. I've come to be instructed that it's beneficial to breathe, engage one of those muscles, in this case my left cheek, my surgical side. Good. I'll count to 5 in my head while I'm breathing, and then release it. I'll then go to the other side and engage that, because each muscle may be operating differently, if at all. I'll then go down to my knee on the left side, draw the knee back towards the wall, which will tighten my upper thigh, and breathe, activating the muscle, stimulating fluids, blood, and awareness, finishing the exhales and releasing. I'll then go to the right side, and I get to notice the difference from one side to the other, which is rather significant. Hold for about 5 seconds and release. So then we can create a pattern. Left cheek, active, breathing, relaxing, using your references. Good. and release. Going to the right cheek. Yes, it may feel differently. Good. And release. Left knee, draw back. Good. Head comes back a little more readily. Good. Release. Right knee back. Good. Head back. Release. Wonderful. Take a break and shake it out. Next, we'll start to integrate those individual muscles with the opposite side of the body. What that means is when I'm engaging my left cheek, I'm going to actively curl my right shoulder blade underneath my back ribs. Good. And release. Because we have these diagonal elements of engagement through our body. Similarly, when I engage my right cheek, I can rotate my left shoulder blade behind my ribs and my head draws back to the wall more readily. And release. Then as we move away from center, there's a little bit more levering effect, so that when my left knee draws back and my head, I can rotate my right hand more open towards you and release it. Similarly, when I draw the right knee back, I can curl that left shoulder blade and embrace and stabilize my upper body there. Beautiful. And release. Eventually, we might garner attention to both cheeks and see what happens. Still, I have a difference from this side to this side with my hands. But hey, this is a practice. And release. Similarly, I'll engage both knees backward. My head just jumps towards the wall and my arms can lengthen, relaxing these upper traps. These muscles here sometimes overwork, especially if you're leaning forward when walking. You don't need a walker to shuffle. We can do it quite readily. We'll prepare a little further to walk with some warm-ups called extension upward by lifting the heels and squatting back similar to chair pose. I've moved a little bit away from the wall because when I do my chair pose, I'm looking to extend my bun down and back as I engage my thighs. Also, I have the chair or the walker, depending on what you're using, positioned in front of me so I have my hands able to rest on the arms or something stable. We'll start with the palms down because that's what we're used to for stability. Consider on the inhale, gently engaging the inner thighs, lifting the heels, and bringing the body up and forward while breathing. If you have capacity, you may not have to hold on to something, but I encourage for safety to do so at the beginning. Finish your exhales and lower. We'll practice just some straight vertical lifts, raising the heels, using stability but not gripping. You can have a gentle downward pressure even with the back of the hands if that's comfortable, and then lowering. So I'm engaging, lifting, breathing, beautiful, and then on the exhale, I'm going to slowly lower, take another breath, and start drawing my bun down and back, keeping my chest up and forward, gazing across the room, drawing the shoulder blades together, and I can release if safe. Good. Another breath, come up and return. So we could practice this chair pose where literally you can envision that you're trying to lower your bottom onto the chair, and most chairs are too low, so it makes life a little more challenging to do this with great integrity. But I've practiced a bit because of my many rehabs, as well as what our organization seeks to do, helping you manage and adapt chairs to fit your body, as well as other elements of life. Good. So we've gotten that chair element in. Let's compare how they are together. See if you can come up with integrity. Breathe. Notice how this feels. Good. Then come on down after about 5 seconds. Lower the tail first. Engage the thighs. Use support. You might rest or you may not. Notice my elbows are down. Good. And then come up. This is activating my glutes, my inner thighs, my abdominal muscles, so that when we eventually motor around, we'll be very graceful. Let's do one more. Come on up on the inhale, breathe. Relax the upper arms if possible, resting if you need. Good, one more breath. Wonderful. Coming down, pausing, inhaling. See if you can reach back. Maybe there's a chair behind you somewhere else. Good, slide it under. And rest. From here, I'm going to demonstrate what I like to use for myself, and actually new parents like this too, is the concept of walking in a figure 8. Why a figure 8? Well, you don't wear the carpeting or your shoes out as much, but also as you're going around, half the time you're veering to the right and half the time you're veering to the left. If you're carrying a child or other items, then you might be always leaning to one side. Here you have potential to transfer from one side to the other. Let's set up for a little walking demonstration. Let's go for a little walk and see how it feels for you. I encourage you to watch where you're going instead of the screen, listening to me as well as your body and breath. I'll start slowly leading with my compromised foot and just trying to keep my body upright, keeping my tailbone down, my shoulder blades down, my heart upward, and then I'm circling in a small circle. I was veering to the left, and now I'll be veering to the right. I might be taking one step and one breath. As you can tell from our very elaborate studio, that it doesn't take much to have space, because it's about how level is the floor, what are the obstacles, and how do we negotiate them. Here I'm not concerned with the periphery, just what's in front of me. Having that mindful experience of slow heel, ball, toe, avoiding gripping, but keeping my elbows down and my chest up. Eventually, I might be able to walk with less assistance, but not rushing to do so, because having a surgery meant that things were pretty out of whack. And just because the surgery is done doesn't mean it's all fixed. We have lots of muscles to negotiate. So I'm going to pause, recalibrate, let go of my brake release, because this is a special walker that has brake already in it. I have my rubber bands because this is already locked in. And I'm going to slip this under here to undo the brake. See how that moves. For me, as I'm making progress, I'd like to think that there may be little moments where I can check my integrity, not necessarily on a curve, that's called discretion, but as I come around towards a more straightaway, I can project and return, breathing, heel ball toe. Notice my elbows are near my ribs as opposed to collapsing forward and trying to run through it. I'm promenade as if I was taking my time in the supermarket, just guiding the cart. And whether you're challenged or not, you might consider in the supermarket how you can be graceful and move about slowly, optimizing your body. Then, once you feel a little more confident, we could start to activate those glutes. How often do you activate your glutes? Think about it. So for here, when I'm standing on my right leg, I'm activating my right glute, I'm stepping forward, I'm transferring, I'm activating my left glute, and then transferring. And if you thought that just trying to breathe and walk, keep the elbows in and the chest up was plenty, wait till you start activating your glutes. Because those are muscles that are working very hard, but very limitedly. And with each step, I'm engaging that same side glute. Right glute here, left glute here. So let's just practice that a little bit more. See how that can add to your stability, strength, capacity, that you may improve your gait and eventually improve the quality of your life. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to sharing more helpful tips with you soon. Keep on striving. Namaste.